All right, well, with 3.3 million Americans filing for unemployment last Thursday, new numbers come out tomorrow, and the Fed and among other organizations and think tanks are predicting that unemployment could rise this year to put us over the 30% mark, 30% of 327 million Americans. So the question is this the beginning of the next Great Depression? My name is Justin. As you guys know, I am a father of four. We have a lot of fun, but life is also crazy normally. So on top of that now with a worldwide pandemic, it adds to a lot of the craziness. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to touch base and look at some actual facts as opposed to all the memes that are floating around on social media, and look at who is saying what. Yesterday, there was a White House briefing. There's one now every day. They've become more and more unique, depending on who's speaking at any given point. But yesterday, the current president of the United States said that the virus could kill between 100,000 and 240,000 Americans. Those are the numbers if all of this social distancing is put into place. That's why the federal government is extending guidelines up until April 30th for us to practice social distancing. If you're unfamiliar with that, I'm sure you've heard the term at least. It means that you're not gathering with people, even other family members like extended family. Groups of 10 or less is the ideal, and we're staying at home, we're washing hands. Any kind of meetings that need to take place for work, etc., should be done virtually. And this is to prevent the spread of this highly infectious virus, which is the coronavirus, because it affects people differently. And many times people will carry the virus, not even showing symptoms of it, pass it on to someone else who is much more susceptible. And then because of a pre-existing condition, that someone else then ends up passing away. Another thing that came out of the briefing yesterday, which was crazy to me, it said that the models predicting the deaths in the United States if we do not practice social distancing, meaning if people just continue to go about their normal lives, go out to restaurants, go out to bars, even going to the workplace where you're around a lot of people, and which is something that's very normal and obligatory if we want to have obviously a living to make. However, if that continues, the death rate in the United States, according to official numbers by the White House, as well as think tanks at Harvard and at Stanford, could rise into the millions. I think the number was as many as 2.2 million, not infected, but 2.2 million deaths, which is just astronomical. That's way more than China. New indications are coming out from the scientific community that China most likely lied about their numbers, of the numbers of people who were infected and consequently who died, as they've seen huge orders of urns being sent to Hubei province, as well as they saw the disappearance of millions of phone accounts. Millions. And so I don't know what those numbers are. Right now there's more questions than there are answers, and so I want to be very careful about that. But the facts are this is a highly contagious virus. It's obviously affecting the health in our communities, but probably something even more long-lasting will be the economic effects. Like I said, 3.3 million Americans filed for unemployment last week. Numbers are predicted to rise up into 31 to 32% of Americans being unemployed. Now, to give you an idea of the gravity of that, during the height of the Great Depression, which began in 1929 with the crash of the stock market because they were overinflating stock prices and people were buying like crazy off of credit. And so, well, regardless, you can look up the stock market. But at the height of the unemployment, at the height of the Great Depression, unemployment in 1933 hit its peak at 24.9% of Americans. At that time, we had around 120 million Americans. So almost 25% of 120 million Americans were officially unemployed. If we rise to 30, even 30%, which is higher than that percent in 1933 at the peak of the Great Depression of unemployment, we're gonna have millions and millions of Americans that are out of a job, because our population is no longer 120 million. It's not even 200 million. We have over 327 million Americans, and 30% of that is gonna mean close to 100 million Americans that are officially out of work. And what's that going to do? If you look at what happened with the Great Depression, we had not only mass unemployment, we had rises in crime, we had issues with housing market, similar, way worse, but for those of us who are alive now, similar to what happened in 2008, where you had huge decreases in value to the housing market, and we just had a really rough time. And it wasn't short-lived. It was close to a decade before we entered into World War II, and a huge production in the defense arena, the defense industry, I guess you could call it, is what took us out of the Great Depression. It was a war. And so, a couple of things. They're saying that even though our unemployment here in the US may very legitimately rise up to 31, 32% of Americans, that it will be short-lived. There's a lot of question marks that come up with that, though. Short-lived in what sense? Because once you close down an industry, like the restaurant industry or the gaming industry, I'm in Las Vegas, literally the strip of Las Vegas is empty. It's like a ghost town. How do you just automatically turn that machine back on? How do you turn that industry back on after 1, 2, 3, 4 months of inactivity? There's a lot of question marks, because this is so unprecedented that we don't have the answers to. And so will it function just as easily as it did before? Or will there be a learning curve? Will there be a work production curve, so to speak, or a payment curve? We just don't know. So whether or not it will be short-lived, which is what the optimist in me really wants to believe, or whether this will be elongated over the long term, 12 months, 24 months, gosh, I hope not more. We could be looking at very deep economic depression in the United States. And because we are in a super interconnected world, that means similar to the global Great Depression in the 20th century, we'll be looking at a global Great Depression. If that happens, if it's allowed to continue much longer. So this will not just be an American problem, but a world problem, just as it is currently with the pandemic. So the question is then, well, why don't we just go back to work? Why would we even risk this? And I think that's what, bless his heart, I do not agree with the man on so many things, and in his mind, I think the only thing that he can focus on is our current president, whom I'm speaking of, is the economic repercussions. I think that's what he's cared about for the majority of his life, has been money, and he sees that as kind of the legacy of his presidency currently deteriorating because of this. Unemployment is going to be soaring. It already is soaring. It's record-breaking, the amount of people that filed for unemployment last week. And so he is so much back and forth between experts and between Fox News and between this and that on, well, we need to open America. And so yesterday he finally said, and the White House officially said, we're extending those guidelines at least until the 30th of April. Now, most states, mind you, are extending these guidelines through June. And so what do we do? Well, it's kind of hard, because in America we have this kind of homegrown freedom desire in us that's been here since our roots, since the Constitution. When we gained independence, we're very much don't provoke me or I'll provoke you kind of people. We want to not be told what to do. We want to get out and we want to do it. And there's this huge debate in America about government versus autonomy of the people, and that the government is to serve us and not the other way around, which is fine. However, if we don't, let me be very clear here, if we don't nip this in the bud quickly, the health aspect of it, in other words, we flatten that curve like everybody's been talking about, including on social media, and we are able to see a decrease in infections and a decrease in deaths for this coronavirus pandemic. If we don't do that, then the economic repercussions, which have already begun. Hundreds of thousands of people here in Las Vegas alone have been hopefully temporarily laid off. And in other cities likewise, you just cannot work. I can't even, my sales job has been extremely stifled, and I'm doing a lot of stuff online currently. But if we're not able to nip this in the bud, then the economic repercussions are gonna be very long lasting. They're gonna be deep, they're gonna hurt. People are gonna lose their livelihood, they're gonna lose their assets. The assets are gonna be extremely devalued. The housing market, people are gonna lose value, equity in their homes. Businesses are going to disappear. When those big companies disappear because they can no longer function, then people who own stock in those companies are going to lose their retirement. And I'm not trying to be doom and gloom here. What I'm trying to tell you is that this is unprecedented in our lifetime. And not only in this century, but most people alive have never seen anything like this. And to be frank with you, it seems like from the initial numbers that this could be economically much more serious than even the Great Depression was. And that, for me, it's not cause for fear, but what it's cause for is for preparation, and to please do what you can to spread the word organically for people to, yes, wash your hands. Gosh, if you haven't learned how to wash your hands yet at this age in your life, please learn that. But please practice social distancing. I just saw an article that in the state of Florida, there's an uptick in vacationers on the beaches of Florida. It boggles my mind because there's so much disinformation. You would think in the information age with the internet that we would be able to inform each other between countries, between states, between people, between all these different methods that we have via social media and online media, with newspapers and with television, that we would have the ability to see what has happened in places like Italy and Spain and China, even though there's a bunch of muddled questions around the disinformation there. And we would be able to learn from that. But instead, there are amongst us people who, A, they don't want to be told what to do, or B, they're opportunistic, or both, or C, they're looking for, hey, this is my opportunity now. My kids aren't in school. I don't have to go to work. I'm going to go on vacation. And they're going for instant gratification over long-term stability, which is so selfish. So is this the next Great Depression? I don't know. Nobody knows. And so in conclusion, we have a lot of numbers that are making us think a lot. It'll be interesting to see what Dr. Fauci, who is the expert that has been jumping on and off of these White House briefings, as well as other think tanks around the country here in the United States, continue to say. Because even their models change. It changes from day to day. I will say this, I just noted in the news that the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, said that our models are looking eerily similar to what has happened in Italy. And if you'll remember, we all saw it all over social media. Italy was hit extremely hard. Their hospitals were to capacity and they had more than they could handle, so they had to turn people away. In many cases, people even died in their homes because they could not receive treatment in the hospitals. This is the United States of America. We're supposed to be a world leader economically. We're supposed to be a world leader morally. We're supposed to be a world leader with regard to peace. Let me be very clear, that none of that matters. I don't know if that was built around propaganda or if that was built around a past life of what the United States has represented historically. But the fact of the matter is, we need to prepare. And that's the message that's coming from our political leaders and leaders within the scientific and medical community. So please be prepared. Take care of your families. It's going to get much worse with regard to health and economically. And so that does worry me. It doesn't make me scared, but it does make me think, what am I going to do to prepare? So if you're new here on this channel, this was a little bit more of a unique video. I guess I'll call it a day in the millennial life. But as a father, as a millennial, as an American, as a human being, we have more cause for concern right now than I think ever before in my life. And I'm only 33, but be careful. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. I will be uploading more videos in English. We also have a Spanish channel. If you happen to speak Spanish, it's called Los Perms. So you can look up that channel. We have a pretty big audience throughout the United States, Latin America, and Europe and the world who are Spanish speakers. Thank you. Bye.